In high school, I was a pretty typical student, focusing on classes, sports, and my social life. I wasn't particularly popular, but I had a tight-knit group of friends. It was during this time that I met Agnes, a girl with a bright smile and a quick wit. We clicked right away, sharing many of the same interests, and over time, our friendship grew into something deeper. By senior year, we were inseparable, and people at school saw us as the classic high school couple. Everything felt perfect. After graduation, Agnes and I planned to attend the same college, and our future together seemed set. We often talked about marriage, and I genuinely believed I had found the person I'd spend my life with. Back then, I couldn't imagine anything that could come between us. I first met Agnes in 9th grade, and by the following year, we were regularly dating. From 10th grade on, our relationship was solid. We made it through high school without any major problems, and as cheesy as it sounds, we had our first physical engaging moment together after senior prom. Once that part of our relationship began, it became a regular thing. We had been talking about marriage since 11th grade, but decided to wait until after college to make any big decisions. College changed Aggie. In high school, everyone knew we were a couple, and the guys stayed away from her. But that didn't carry over once we got to college. While there were a few familiar faces from high school, most of the students were from other places. The guys didn't see Aggie as my girlfriend. They saw her as a beautiful girl, and she was constantly getting hit on. I knew it was happening, but there wasn't much I could do. We had different majors and took separate classes, so we usually only saw each other in the evenings after classes and after I finished work. The attention started to affect Aggie. She became more flirty, to put it simply. Several times I saw her walking with other guys, laughing and talking, but I was across the quad and she didn't notice me. A couple of times I took a shortcut through the student union between classes and saw her in the cafeteria, once with a guy and another time with two guys. It didn't hit me until much later that I never saw her with other girls, always guys. It didn't worry me. We were a couple, right? We were in love, right? We were planning to get married, right? So I had nothing to worry about, right? She was gorgeous, so of course guys would be drawn to her. But she was mine, and she showed it every night when we were together. Years later, we graduated, got jobs in our fields, got married, and started a life of wedded bliss. For almost 6 years, I was blissfully unaware, living what felt like an ideal life, until everything came crashing down. My wake-up call came by accident. I was at my desk when Molly from the mailroom dropped off some files. I picked up the top one and began reviewing it, wondering why it had been sent to me since it concerned an account that Wally Bergman was handling. Wally was an old friend from high school and college. About halfway through, I noticed a serious mistake. A quick mental calculation showed that the projections were off by nearly $3 million. I reached for my calculator to verify the numbers when Wally rushed into my office, asking if I had seen the file. "I need to make copies and present this to the Apex people in half an hour," Wally said, clearly stressed. "I have it right here," I replied. Not sure why it ended up with me, but I looked it over. "You might not want to present this to Apex," I added, showing him the mistake. His face turned white. "Jesus, Rob, this could have cost me my job. I need to fix this right away," Wally muttered as he grabbed the file and hurried out. It was a Thursday, and Aggie always worked late on Thursdays to prepare payroll for Friday. So, like usual, I went to Bud's bar after work for a half-pound burger and a couple of beers before heading home. I had just finished my meal and was on my second beer when Wally walked in, saw me, and joined me at my booth. He ordered a beer and told the waitress, "Put his tab on me. It's the least I can do after he saved my job today." I shrugged. "No complaints here, Wally." We talked about work for a bit, just the usual stuff. But then Wally shifted the conversation to something personal. "I've got to ask you something, Rob," he said, leaning in. "It's none of my business, but you're a nice guy, and I really like you. Why do you put up with Aggie's nonsense?" I blinked, confused. "I don't know what you mean, Wally." "Why do you let her cheat on you?" he asked bluntly. I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about, Wally?" He looked at me and seemed to realize something. His face dropped. "Oh, God, you didn't know?" he mumbled. He started to get up, but I grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. "No way, Wally. You can't drop a bomb like that and run." "Sit down and explain," I demanded. "I don't know what to say, Rob," he stammered, visibly uncomfortable. "Just say it, Wally. Tell me," I insisted. "I thought you knew, Rob. I mean, it's been, 10 years and you didn't know?" Wally looked at me in disbelief. "My God, Rob, how could you not know?" "Know what, Wally?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "That Aggie That Aggie is a round-heeled promiscuous, Wally whispered, looking ashamed. I just stared at him, too shocked to respond. Wally looked at me with regret in his eyes. I'm sorry, Rob. I wish I hadn't said anything. But you did, Wally, I said, shaking off the shock. So now you need to finish. How do you know? How long have you known? I've known since our senior year of high school, Wally admitted. And I know because I'm one of the guys who slept with her. I was floored, but I needed more answers. Start from the beginning, Wally, and don't leave anything out. Please, don't leave anything out, I urged again. The story that unfolded was shocking to me. Not just the details, but the fact that it had been happening for over 10 years without me ever having a clue. 2 weeks after the senior prom, Wally went over to his cousin George's house. As usual, he walked in and headed straight for George's bedroom, expecting him to be on the computer. But George wasn't on the computer. He was on and in, Aggie, Wally stated bluntly. Wally stood there watching, and both Aggie and George saw him. Since neither of them told him to leave, he undressed and waited for his turn. We took turns with Aggie until she said she had to get cleaned up to meet you when you got off work at Jessup's Market, Wally explained. He and George would sleep with her whenever I was at work until George got serious with Melody Martin. She slept with me for a couple of weeks, and then one day when I stopped by, she was already with Mike Bella and Justin Walsh. I undressed and joined in. The three of us were with her until she had to leave to meet you, Wally admitted. He continued. I shared her with several other guys, and many times she'd sleep with a group of 6 or more. I know we were friends, Wally went on, but it wasn't like we were best friends, you know. And remember how we were at 18, always thinking about Zex. He looked at me and added, You guys were kind of going steady, but I didn't think it was that serious. I mean, if you were really serious, would she be sleeping with anyone who came along? And it didn't stop in college, Wally added. I remember her schedule freshman year, Monday through Thursday and Tuesday through Friday with no classes on Wednesday. Her last class on Monday through Thursday ended at 2, and on Tuesday through Friday at 1. I don't remember your schedule, Wally continued, but when you got out of class, you went to work. When Aggie got out of class, she was off to someone's bedroom. Wednesdays were like all-day Zex marathons. It was like that all through school, Rob. Schedules changed, but the constant was Aggie fooling around until you got off work. I'm making it sound like it was every day, but it wasn't, he clarified. 2 or 3 times a week. Most of us were shocked when you and Aggie got married. We thought you had to know what she'd been doing. But you married her anyway. A lot of us figured maybe you were one of those guys who liked your woman with other men. Tyler even thought maybe you two were into open relationships, but no one ever saw you with another girl. We always saw Aggie with other guys. I had no idea, Wally, I finally managed to say. Damn, Rob, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but since you didn't know, it's likely you don't know that she has a regular Thursday night date with Bob and Bill Howard. On the Tuesday nights when you go bowling, she's with Mark Willard. I don't know who else she sees or when, but it's safe to assume that anytime you're off doing something, Aggie is too, Wally said confidently. He paused before adding, Not that it matters much, but I stopped being with her after you two got married. A single woman is one thing, but fooling around with a married woman is a whole different story. I don't know what to say, Wally, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm definitely going to do something. I finished my beer and stood up to leave. I stopped and turned to Wally. Thanks, Wally. Thanks for the burger, the beer, and for waking me up. As I drove home, I kept replaying what Wally had told me in my head. Did I really believe it? Part of me wanted to say no way. Aggie loved me, and she wouldn't do that. But another part of me knew Wally wouldn't lie. He had to know I'd check on what he said. And if it wasn't true, how could we keep working together? The answer was simple. We couldn't, and Wally was aware of that. It was going to be tough enough working with him knowing what he and Aggie had done, but I figured we'd get past it eventually. After all, I remembered being a teenager, constantly thinking about Zex. I knew that if another guy's girlfriend had offered herself to me back then, and if I didn't have Aggie, I'd probably have taken the chance. The real question was, what the hell do I do now? I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. Aggie and I were over. Maybe, just maybe, I could have overlooked a one-night drunken mistake or even a short-term affair if Aggie convinced me it wouldn't happen again. But 10 years of cheating? No way. That night, I pretended to be asleep when Aggie came home after finishing payroll. I ignored her touch. She wants to give me sloppy seconds, I thought, and I'm not going to take it. I'd unknowingly been taking them for years, and it hadn't eliminated me. But now I knew the truth. and just the feel of her hand on me made my skin crawl. For the first time ever, I didn't get in hardness when she touched me. I woke up before Aggie the next morning, made coffee, and was reading the paper when she came downstairs. "What happened to you last night?" she asked. "I came home aroused and eager, and you were already in bed. That's not like you, Rob." "Something I ate didn't sit well with me. I went to bed early," I lied. "Well, I hope you're feeling better today. You'll need to make up for last night," she teased with a smile. As soon as I got to work, I called Felix Mather, a friend from high school who now practiced corporate law. I asked him to recommend a take-no-prisoners divorce lawyer. "Crap," Felix responded. I frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "It means I was hoping this wasn't happening, that you're actually looking for a divorce lawyer," Felix explained. "It means what I thought you and Aggie had isn't what you actually have, and that you finally found out about her." I was taken aback. "What did you think we had? An open marriage or something?" I asked. "How else could Aggie do what she was doing and still stay with you?" Felix replied. "Everyone knew you were devoted to her. It only made sense if you were okay with it." Believe it or not, Felix, I had no idea what she was doing. Not until yesterday. There was a brief silence on the line before Felix finally said, "Call Tom Sweet and tell him I sent you." I contacted Sweet and mentioned Felix had recommended him. He said he could see me that day if I could be there by 1. I agreed and showed up on time. Sweet laid out my options, ranging from an amicable separation to an Attila the Hun scorched earth policy. "We're not in a no-fault state," he explained, "and infidelity is a valid ground for divorce. But to use infidelity, you need solid evidence. Hearsay isn't enough." "How do I get the evidence?" I asked. He handed me a card that read, "Gaston Marshall, private investigator." "His office is just across the street. I can call him now and see if he can meet with you." "Please do," I replied. "I want to get this over with as quickly as possible." Sweet made the call. And 10 minutes later, I found myself in Gaston Marshall's office, learning what needed to be done. Unfortunately, one of the main things required was for me to act completely normal around Aggie, giving her no reason to suspect that I was no longer the clueless fool she was used to. "As unpleasant as it may be," Marshall said, "you can't change your routine. If you're having sex 3 or 4 times a week, you'll have to keep doing it. If you usually initiate, you need to keep that up. Just remember, it's no longer about making love, it's just physical. Don't do anything that might cause her to change her behavior. It's crucial she stays unaware of the shift in your relationship." I went back to my office, swallowed my pride, and called Aggie at work. We had a habit of going out for dinner every Friday night and breakfast every Sunday morning, so when I reached her, I asked, "How about trico cheese for dinner?" She agreed. While I was eating veal, Marsala and Aggie was enjoying her rigatoni with white wine. Employees from Marshall Investigations were busy installing wireless cameras and listening devices in our home. As I sipped my Merlot, Marshall's instructions echoed in my mind. "It's natural for you to want to look for the hidden cameras, but you have to resist that urge. If she catches you, everything we're working for could fall apart. You also need to act natural in the bedroom, which won't be easy unless you're comfortable with being watched. The system is sound and motion activated, and you will be on camera. Don't let the idea of my employees watching you interfere. There's a switch that lets you turn off the system while you're home," he had warned. "But people tend to forget to turn it back on when they leave. My advice? Leave the system running and pretend you're filming a spicy tape." After dinner, I asked Aggie, "Feel like grabbing a few drinks and maybe going dancing?" "No," she said. "We need to get home so you can make up for last night." On the drive home, she slid over next to me and unzipped my pants. "Be careful, sweetie. Don't crash and make me bite something off." In my head, what she was doing wasn't special anymore. It was just the same thing she had likely done with 100 other men over the past 10 years. But as disgusted as I was, after a few minutes, my body reacted. Soon, it was over, and I pulled into our driveway. "Hurry up and get to the bedroom," Aggie commanded. I couldn't follow Marshall's advice. There was no way I could act natural knowing I might be performing for an audience. It would already be hard enough to pretend everything was normal while being physical engaging with Aggie. So I went to where the switch was and turned the system off. I left my cell phone on the car seat, figuring I'd see it when I left the house, reminding me to turn the system back on. I wasn't sure if Aggie noticed or not, but I didn't make love to her that night. I just went through the motions. Unfortunately, once wasn't enough for her, and I had to go 2 more rounds before she let me sleep. The next morning, I got up and dressed for my usual run. Before I left, Aggie reminded me, I won't be here when you get back. I've got a hair appointment, but I should be home by 2. I had always wondered why her hair appointments took from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Aggie used to say it was because she ended up gossiping with the other regulars and sometimes went to lunch with them. That could have been true, but after everything I'd learned recently, I suspected she was probably meeting one of her friends, either before or after the appointment. As I left, I made sure to turn the system back on. I doubted anything would happen while I was out on my run, but I knew I had to get into the habit of keeping the system on whenever I wasn't home. The switch only controlled the cameras. The listening devices and phone tap were always active. After my usual 5-mile run, I returned home and headed down to the basement, where I had told Marshall to store the recorders. I thought it was the best spot since Aggie rarely went down there and almost never into my work area. There were 2 receivers in the cabinet, one for the listening devices and phone tap, and the other for the DVD recorder connected to the wireless cameras. I checked the phone tap recorder, and sure enough, my suspicions were confirmed. I played back the recording. "Hello?" Aggie's voice. "Good morning, lover. Are we still on for today?" A man's voice asked, one that sounded disturbingly familiar. "You bet. The wife took the kids to the zoo, so we have until 6 tonight," Aggie replied. "You know I can't stay that long. I need to be home by 2. Any later, and Rob might start asking questions. He's already wondered why I don't get home until 2. Then skip the hair appointment and come over so we can make it happen," the man suggested. "Yeah, sure," Aggie responded. "And what do I tell Rob when he asks why my hair isn't done after being gone so long?" "I want more time with you, baby, but we'll have to settle for what we can get." As I listened, my blood ran cold. I recognized the man's voice. It was my cousin, Lou. Fury surged through me as I went back upstairs, wondering how many of my other relatives Aggie had been with, or was still seeing. By the time Aggie got home from her so-called hair appointment, I had managed to get my anger under control. I kept it together, and about an hour after she got back, I faked a fall down the basement stairs. "I think I pulled a muscle or something. My back's injuring me," I told her. That excuse would buy me a few days of not having to be physical engaged with her. On Monday, I called Aggie at work and said, "I'm going to be out of town on Tuesday. I'll be gone until Friday, but I'll be back in time to take you out to dinner." Of course, there was no trip. I figured it might be a waste of 3 days, but I didn't think so. I traveled about once a month for work, and Aggie was always home when I made my nightly check-in calls. Since I called at random times, anywhere between 7 and 10, I doubted she waited for my calls before heading out. If she was cheating as much as I suspected, she was probably doing it in our bed while I was talking to her. That was my hope, anyway. If the cameras caught her, I'd have the undeniable proof my lawyer needed for the divorce. That evening, Aggie tried to initiate. "I need something to hold me over for the 3 nights you'll be gone," she said. "Yeah, right," I thought, but I told her, "My back still hurts too much." On Tuesday morning, Aggie kissed me goodbye, suitcase in hand, as I headed out for my supposed business trip. I drove to work, put in most of the day, and then left at 3 p.m., parking a block away from the house. With my laptop in hand, I accessed the software Marshall had installed and started listening to the phone tap. "Hello?" Aggie's voice came through. "Hey, Zexy Hunk, it's me," she said playfully. "What's up?" a man responded. "Hubby just left on a 3-day trip. You ready to spend 3 fun-filled nights with me?" Aggie asked. "Does a duck walk barefoot on the beach?" he joked. "I'll take that as a yes," she replied. "You call Tony. I've got to get to work, but I'll be home by 6. See you then." I shut down my laptop and called Tom Sweet. "Have the papers ready to serve by Thursday," I instructed him, and explained how I wanted them delivered. "That will cost more than the usual fee," Sweet cautioned. "I don't care," I replied. I left the neighborhood, drove to the other side of town, and checked into a motel. It had a restaurant and bar next door, so I settled in for my 3-day stay. The bar was a country western joint, with a jukebox full of great dance songs. Just my kind of place. Every night I went there, and every night a few unattached women seemed unwilling to let me sit alone while the music played. The first night, a beautiful redhead came up to me and said, "Come on, sugar, they're playing our song," as she grabbed my hand, pulling me off the bar stool and onto the dance floor. As we started to waltz, she said, "Don't get the wrong idea, sugar. I'm not on the prowl. I just love to dance, and you were sitting there." Her name was Rhonda, and after the dance, she invited me to join her and her friends, Laura and Shelby, at their table. I spent the rest of the evening dancing with them. "We're here 2 or 3 nights a week," Rhonda said as I was leaving. Then I'll probably see you again, I replied, feeling the best I had in days. The next afternoon at 3 p.m., I was parked a block away from the house again, watching the footage from the wireless cameras of the previous night. The two guys who had joined Aggie in the bedroom were at least 6 years younger than her, and I wondered if it was youthful energy she was chasing. The scene wasn't anything special, just standard stuff, but it was surreal to watch my wife being double-teamed. What I was really interested in was the audio. I expected to hear Aggie mocking me or my lovemaking, but to my surprise, she didn't. She never even mentioned me, except when one of the guys said he wished they could meet up more often. Aggie apologized, saying, "Sorry, but my husband comes first." Wednesday followed the same pattern. The only time she brought me up was to remind them, "You need to be out of the house by 6 in the morning. None of the neighbors are early risers, so I want you gone before anyone sees you." By Thursday morning, they left promptly at 6, so I called my attorney and moved the serving of the papers to Friday morning. At 5:45 a.m. on Friday, I was parked just down the street. At 5:55 a.m., the front door opened and the two men walked out. As they turned to say goodbye to Aggie, they spotted a man standing by the door. He stepped forward, handed the papers to Aggie, and walked away, leaving her and her companion standing there, stunned. I pulled up in front of the house and honked, making sure Aggie saw me. I waved goodbye and drove off. The papers she received weren't just legal documents. They included a letter from me. It said that I never wanted to speak to her again unless it was through our attorneys. I didn't want to hear excuses or promises that it would never happen again. I didn't want to hear that she only loved me or that the sex with others was meaningless. I didn't want to hear that we could move past this because of our love. I didn't want any of the typical lies cheaters come up with when they get caught. Of course, Aggie ignored the letter. 15 minutes after I drove off, my phone rang. It was Aggie. I let it go to voicemail, along with the next 7 calls from her. When I got to work, I told my secretary, "Martha, I've left Aggie. Don't put any of her calls through." She nodded. As I turned to head into my office, another thought occurred to me. "Oh, and Martha, if she shows up, tell her I'm not in. Say I'm meeting with a client." Martha gave me a sympathetic smile. "No problem, Mr. Burns." 5 minutes later, I spoke with Iris at the front desk. "If my wife shows up, call me and stall her. Give me enough time to slip out the side door. I'll head to the cafe and wait until she leaves." "I've got you covered, Mr. Burns," Iris assured me. I thanked her and thought, not for the first time, that a good secretary is worth her weight in gold. Aggie called my cell 17 times that day. I ignored every call. During lunch, I called my dad and brother to fill them in on what was happening. I asked my dad to tell Mom and to do his best to keep her from pushing me to work things out with Aggie. "I'll talk to her," Dad said, "but you know how your mother feels about Aggie. It's going to be tough." I sighed. My mom had always seen Aggie as the daughter she never had. At the end of the workday, I still had plenty to do, and since I didn't have to rush home, I decided to stay late and catch up. Around 5 p.m., Martha came by to let me know she was leaving. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Burns," she said, then added, "By the way, your wife called 5 times before noon. Each time I told her you'd instructed me not to put her through. I think she finally got the message. She hasn't called since." I thanked her and kept working until about 7 p.m. When I reached the lobby, Iris was gone and Hank, our night watchman, was sitting at the reception desk. "Big night out with the missus?" Hank asked. "Why would you think that?" "She's out there waiting for you," Hank said, nodding toward the parking lot. "We're getting a divorce, Hank," I explained. "She wants to talk, and I don't. If she knocks, don't let her in. And if she uses the intercom, tell her you're alone in the building and that the log says my car's here because it wouldn't start. Let her know the towing company's coming in the morning to take it to the shop." "No problem, Mr. Burns. Divorces aren't fun. I've been through 2 myself." I nodded and slipped out the back door to avoid Aggie. I looped around the block, crossed the street, and walked down the alley to the back entrance of Dave's Diner. I took a seat where I could keep an eye on Aggie, who was still waiting by my car. I ordered the special and watched her while I ate. Halfway through my dessert, I saw her approach the building and press the intercom. Hank must have followed my instructions because after a short while, she returned to her car and drove off. I finished my dessert, had one last cup of coffee, and then left. Later that night, I stopped by a bar for a couple of beers. There were a few women sitting alone, clearly hoping for a dance partner, but I wasn't in the mood. I had my 2 beers and left. Saturday morning was hectic. I had a lot to take care of, things I should have handled before serving Aggie the divorce papers. I just hoped it wasn't too late and that she hadn't already done what I should have done first. I went to the bank and cleaned out all the joint accounts. I took the certificates of deposit and my personal papers out of the safe deposit box, but left all of Aggie's belongings there. I also took off my wedding ring and left it in the box for her to find. Afterward, I stopped at the Waffle House for breakfast and used my phone to cancel our 2 joint credit cards. That left me with just a Visa and an American Express in my name. Aggie had her own 2 cards, so all I really did was prevent her from taking cash advances on the joint cards. Once I finished breakfast, I drove back to the motel, parked, and called a cab to take me to the nearest Avis rental office. I rented the cheapest car they had and returned to the motel, spending the afternoon lounging by the pool and reading a book. Before dinner, I turned on my phone to check messages. There were 9, all from Aggie. I deleted them and turned the phone back off. That night, the bar was packed. It was Friday and they had a live band playing. I found a spot at the bar and ordered a beer. Halfway through it, I felt a tug on my shirt. I turned and saw Rhonda standing there. "Hey, cowboy," she smiled. "Why are you sitting here when there's a seat at our table for you?" "I didn't see you with the crowd," I admitted. "To be honest, even if I had, I wouldn't have joined. I wouldn't want to take things for granted." "Nonsense, come on," she insisted, pulling me toward the table. Laura and Shelby were there too, and I greeted them as I sat down. "There's something off about this picture," I said, looking at the 3 of them. 3 stunning women, sitting alone, and you had to come get me? That's just not right. "We get attention," Rhonda explained, "but it's usually from idiots. They see the wedding rings and assume we're here looking for a fling, just some wives out to cheat. We're here to dance, and only a few guys get that. The rest think they're God's gift to women, and we have to fend them off." After the other night, I knew they saw me as safe. "We know you're one of the good guys," Rhonda said with a wink. "You've got an open invitation to join us whenever you're here." "It's none of my business, so feel free to tell me to back off," I began cautiously. "But I've got to ask, why are 3 beautiful married women spending time here without your husbands?" "Fair question," Rhonda acknowledged. "Laura's husband is in the Army Reserve and got deployed to Afghanistan. She was going stir-crazy alone, so we started bringing her out. Shelby's husband works evenings, and mine's a long-haul trucker who's gone a lot. We've teamed up to keep each other company, and we love dancing, so here we are." "What about you?" she asked. "I noticed you had a ring last time, but it's gone now." "I served my wife with divorce papers yesterday morning," I said simply. "I left the ring for her to find." "Does that mean you're free to hunt?" Laura asked. "Not at all," I said quickly. "The divorce is for infidelity, and I'm not about to do anything she could use against me in court." "Good," Laura said with a grin. "We've got a safe dance partner." I spent the rest of the evening dancing with Rhonda, Laura, and Shelby, sharing them with the occasional guy they agreed to dance with. When the bar closed, I went back to the motel in a surprisingly good mood for the first time in days. Sunday was quiet, spent by the pool with a book. On Monday, I drove the rental car to work, hoping Aggie wouldn't see my car and would think I was still out of town, keeping her away. Throughout the week, I got between 6 and 10 calls a day from her, which I ignored. Twice, she called from numbers I didn't recognize. And when I answered and heard her voice, I immediately hung up. Every night after dinner, I stopped by the bar for a beer or 2. Rhonda, Laura, and Shelby were there on Wednesday and Friday, and I joined them for dancing, until 10 on Wednesday and until closing on Friday. By Saturday, I figured Aggie would realize I wasn't going to talk to her, so I returned the rental and drove my car to work on Monday. That turned out to be a mistake. Monday afternoon, when I came out of the building, I saw that Aggie was parked right next to my car. As soon as she saw me, she got out and stood by my driver's side door. "We need to talk, Rob," she said. When I reached my car, I ignored her, but she moved to block the door. "Come on, Rob, you need to let me explain," she insisted. I pushed her aside and she stumbled but didn't fall. By the time she regained her balance, I was already in the car. I rolled down the window and said, "You need to go back and read the letter that came with the divorce papers. Aggie, I will not speak to you unless my attorney is present. And even then, it will only be about the divorce." "I don't want a divorce, Rob, and I don't want you to do this," she pleaded. "Aggie, it's over. Accept it, because I'm not changing my mind." I rolled the window up and drove away, leaving her standing there. On Tuesday, it became clear that Aggie wasn't going to accept my refusal to talk. When I walked to my car after work, 2 guys approached me and grabbed my arms. I recognized them as the same two who had been with Aggie in our bedroom. One of them said, "Don't do anything stupid, old man, and you won't get hurt. Miss Aggie says you're being stubborn, and she wants to talk to you. So we're taking you to her, either the easy way or the hard way. But you're coming with us, old man." I was only 6, maybe 7 years older than those guys. They probably assumed that because I was in a suit and tie carrying a briefcase, I was some soft, older guy. I figured I could take them. They wouldn't expect me to fight back, so I could likely take one out by surprise, and one-on-one, I was confident I could handle the other. Either way, a commotion would draw attention, and their little hijacking plan would fall apart. But then I thought, do I really want to do that? If Aggie was willing to go this far just to get me, what might she try next? If I sent these two back to her all roughed up, it could escalate things. So I let them shove me into the car, sitting between them with my briefcase on my lap as they drove me to the house. Inside, Aggie told them, "Sit him down in a chair and make sure he stays there." She turned to me and said, "We are not getting a divorce." I tried to stand, but the two guys pushed me back down, one of them warning, "You'll stay put if you know what's good for you." Aggie continued, "We're staying married, but there are going to be some changes. I'm sorry you found out about my medical issue, but now that you know, you'll have to deal with it. I love you. Believe it or not, I do, and I'm not letting you go." "Medical issue? What medical issue?" I asked. "I have nymphomania. I've been a nymphomaniac since high school. You triggered it when you took my pureness." "That's ridiculous," I said. "There are treatments for that." "Yes, there are," she replied. "I've tried them all. They make me sluggish and stupid, and I won't live like that. Besides, I enjoy being a nympho. I love Zex, and you know that. I barely ever leave you alone. What I do doesn't hurt you. I love you. I spoil you. So what if I share what you can't use? If you could stay hard 24/7, I wouldn't need anyone else. But you can't, and I have needs. So I let others have what's extra. I don't love them. I love you, and I always come home to you." She handed me some papers. "Here's how it's going to work. This is a post-nuptial agreement where you agree that I can have as many lovers as I need. If you later decide to leave, you'll get nothing." I stared at her. "And what do I get besides a wife who sleeps around?" "You get the same loving wife you've had for 6 years. You thought our marriage was perfect, even though I was doing this the whole time. The only thing wrong now is your ego. You need to accept that things will continue just as they have. It doesn't mean you're not man enough for me. You're a great lover. You always satisfy me, but you just can't keep up with my needs." I looked her in the eyes. "I'll tell you what, Agnes." She hated when I called her that. "I'll sign it if you make a few changes." She looked intrigued. "What kind of changes?" "You don't sleep with me on the same days you sleep with others, and we sleep in separate bedrooms." "I can't do that," she quickly responded. "I need you in bed with me. Why can't you understand that I love you and don't want to lose you?" "That's fine, Agnes. Don't make the changes," I said casually. "I didn't want to sign your so-called agreement anyway." Agitated, she shot back, "Fine, I'll make the changes, and I'll work on getting you back in bed later." She stormed off, saying, "I'll go make the changes on the computer and bring it back." I tried to get up from the chair, but the two guys held me down. I told them, "I need to use the bathroom." One of them said, "Just pee your pants. Miss Aggie said you're staying put until she says otherwise." 5 minutes later, Aggie returned with the revised document. She read it to me and asked, "Where do I sign?" I gestured to the pen she was holding. "Your goons won't let me get up." "Let him up," she instructed them. I stood, walked over to her, and set my briefcase on the table. I took the pen from her, but then set it down, saying, "Not that I don't trust you, but I'm going to read it to make sure it says what you claim." I picked up the papers, read through them, and then laughed. I tore the document in half and threw the pieces in her face. Grabbing my briefcase, I headed for the door. "Stop him!" Aggie yelled, and the two guys moved to block me. When they got close enough, I swung my briefcase toward the first guy's head. It was a solid strike, and he went down. The second guy was caught off guard, and before he could react, I was on him. I punched him in the mouth, causing him to stumble back. I followed with a hard kick to the groin, and he collapsed. Knowing I needed to keep them down, I went to work, kicking both of them in the lap, ribs, and head until Aggie screamed, "Stop it, Rob, or I'll shoot you." I looked over and saw Aggie pointing a Colt at me. "Go ahead and shoot, you miserable witch," I said as I pulled out my cell phone. I called emergency and gave my name and address. "My wife is pointing a Colt at me and threatening to shoot," I told the operator. They advised me to stay calm and said a patrol car was on the way. I hung up and said, Thanks, Agnes. This will make the divorce a lot easier with you in jail. She snapped back, That was stupid, Rob. When the police get here, you'll be the one arrested. You came in, saw me with friends, got jealous and attacked them. It'll be your word against ours, 3 against 1, and we're all fully clothed. You'll be arrested for attack. Oh, Agnes, your love for me is really shining through now, I mocked. Don't worry, Rob, she said confidently. I'll bail you out and Barry and Tony won't press charges. It'll all blow over, I replied. Think again, Agnes. Hank saw those 2 idiots pick me up at work, and Joyce next door saw them drag me into the house. My story is that you had me brought here against my will. When I tried to leave, you ordered your lovers to stop me, and they failed. Then you pulled a Colt. I may spend a night in jail, but once my witnesses speak, you'll be the one behind bars. And I won't be paying your bail, I continued. Let's see what we've got here. Hijacking, unlawful detainment, threatening with a firearm, and making false statements to the police. There may be more I'm forgetting, but your best bet, Agnes, is to keep quiet. Aggie didn't listen, and she and her 2 goons lied to the police. I was taken to jail. The next morning, I called Tom Sweet, told him what happened, and asked him to coordinate with Gaston Marshall to get the surveillance tapes. Aggie soon learned she couldn't bail me out because a judge had to set bail, and that wouldn't happen until Monday. Tom had a friend in the DA's office who watched the tapes showing Barry and Tony restraining me while Aggie pointed the Colt and threatened me. The DA also heard her say she'd lie to the police. When Aggie showed up at the courthouse on Monday for my bail hearing, she was arrested. Warrants were issued for Barry and Tony, and they were locked up by nightfall. I refused to bail out Aggie, and her parents couldn't afford it. Her lawyer contacted me, asking if I'd put up the house as security for her bail. I laughed and hung up. I moved back into the house, hired a locksmith to change the locks, and got a protection order against Aggie to keep her away if she got out of jail. She couldn't come within 1,000 feet of me without being arrested again. As good as Aggie might have been in bed, it wasn't worth doing hard time for, and both Barry and Tony cut deals, giving her up. Aggie later claimed she never would have pulled the trigger, that she was just trying to stop me from hurting them. The jury believed she was trying to stop me from going too far, given some of the things she said, specifically her claims of love for me. She was found not guilty of the felony menacing charge, but convicted of unlawful restraint, filing a false police report, and a few minor offenses. The judge gave her 9 months in county jail and 1,000 hours of community service. While she was in jail, the divorce was finalized, and all I lost was 20% of the house's equity. I put the money in her account and went to the bar next to the motel where I had been staying. I was lucky. Rhonda and Shelby were there. I asked them to help me celebrate my first day of freedom. Laura wasn't there because her husband was back from deployment, and they were catching up. So, why celebrate with us? Rhonda asked. I'm taking a shot in the dark, I replied. I saw the rings on Laura and Shelby, but you're not wearing one. I don't see any tan lines either, so I'm guessing there's no long-haul trucker in your life. Plus, I've always had a thing for redheads. Shelby laughed and said, You were busted, girl, as I pulled Rhonda off her chair and led her to the dance floor. As I drove away from the scene outside my former home, a sense of finality washed over me. I thought I'd feel more anger, more sadness, but instead, there was an eerie calm, a realization that the hardest part wasn't behind me, but that I was finally facing it. The truth I had ignored for so many years had finally come to light, and while it hurt, there was a strange relief in having nothing more to pretend about. The months that followed the divorce were difficult, but not in the ways I had anticipated. I wasn't crippled by the loss of Aggie. I wasn't haunted by the memories of what we used to be. Instead, what weighed on me were the smaller things, the routines we'd built, the little habits that had defined my daily life. I had grown so used to her being around that I almost didn't know how to function without that shadow hanging over me. Even though our marriage had been a lie for so long, there was a hole where the lie used to be. I went through the motions at first, trying to fill that void. Work was a blessing in those early days. I threw myself into my job with a single-minded focus, taking on projects that would keep me at the office late, leaving me too tired to think about anything else when I got home. But I knew I couldn't hide in work forever. Eventually, the office would close, the lights would go out, and I'd have to face the emptiness waiting for me at home. That's when I realized something important. This was my chance to rebuild. My life was no longer tied to Aggie's whims, her betrayals, or the deceit that had poisoned everything between us. I was free, and I could decide for the first time in years what I wanted that freedom to look like. So, I started small. I redecorated the house room by room. The bedroom, where so much of my disillusionment had played out, was the first to change. New sheets, new furniture, a fresh coat of paint. The bed that had once been a battlefield was now a place of peace. Just for me. I got rid of everything that reminded me of the past, every token of the life Aggie and I had built together, and replaced it with pieces that reflected who I was now. It was liberating, in a way I hadn't expected. I thought that removing the physical reminders of Aggie would be painful, that it would drive home the loss of the relationship. But instead, it felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. Each item I removed, each corner of the house I reclaimed, made me feel lighter, more in control. This was my home now, just mine. Of course, I couldn't just erase her from my mind. The memories were still there, lurking. Every so often, I'd catch myself thinking about her, wondering if I had missed something, if I could have done something differently. But those thoughts were fleeting, overshadowed by a deeper understanding that the fault wasn't mine alone. I had trusted someone who didn't deserve my trust. I had given my love to someone who had never truly valued it. And that was on her, not me. Rhonda was a constant presence during this time. What started as casual nights out dancing became more frequent, and I found myself drawn to her more than I had anticipated. She was different from Aggie in every possible way. Where Aggie had been all about appearances, Rhonda was refreshingly honest. She had a way of grounding me, reminding me that life wasn't about chasing after the perfect image, but about finding happiness in the simple things. We spent more time together, and slowly, I began to see a future where I wasn't defined by the wreckage of my past relationship. But I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, not yet. I needed time to heal, to figure out who I was outside of the relationship that had dominated my life for so long. I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes, and Rhonda seemed to understand that. She didn't push, didn't ask for more than I was willing to give. She just was there, and that was enough. As the seasons changed, so did I. I began to fill my life with new experiences. I reconnected with old friends, the kind I hadn't spoken to since high school or college, and realized how much I had let those relationships fade because I was so consumed by my life with Aggie. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years, and found a new appreciation for the quiet moments it gave me. The mornings became my favorite time of day, before the world woke up, when it was just me, the open road, and the sound of my feet hitting the pavement. I also discovered new passions, things I never would have explored while I was with Aggie. I took up cooking, something I'd always been terrible at, and slowly, through trial and error, I got better. There was something satisfying about creating something from scratch, about knowing that I could nourish myself in a way that wasn't just physical. It was symbolic of the way I was rebuilding my life, one meal, one day, one step at a time. There were still hard days, of course. Days when the weight of the past felt too heavy to carry, when the memories of betrayal came rushing back, uninvited. But those days became fewer and farther between. With each passing month, the pain dulled, replaced by a growing sense of hope. Hope that I could build something better for myself, that I could find happiness again, not in the way I had before, but in a way that was truer, more authentic. Rhonda and I continued to see each other, and over time, something deeper began to form between us. It wasn't the whirlwind romance I had experienced with Aggie, but that was okay. In fact, it was better. This was something built on trust, on mutual respect. I wasn't rushing into it, and neither was she. We were taking our time, getting to know each other slowly, and that felt right. One night, as we sat together on my porch watching the stars, Rhonda turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about what might have been if things had been different with Aggie?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No, because if things had been different with her, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't have learned what I needed to learn, and I wouldn't have met you. She smiled, a soft, understanding smile, and we sat there in comfortable silence, both of us content with the present, not weighed down by the past. In the end, I realized that what I had gone through, as painful as it was, had shaped me into the person I was now. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss, it had all been part of my journey. And while I wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone, I also wouldn't change it. because it brought me to a place of clarity, of peace, where I could finally see myself, not as the sufferer of someone else's lies, but as someone who had survived, someone who had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had in store for me next. This was my story now, my life, and I was determined to live it on my own terms. Whatever came next, I knew I'd face it with open eyes, a steady heart, and the knowledge that I was capable of more than I had ever realized. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Truly, deeply free.